Now that we know what an algebraic expression is, let's talk about how to simplify them. So we start with a property of the real numbers known as the distributive property. This property says that A times parentheses B plus C is the same thing as AB plus AC. To say this a little easier, essentially, if you have a number in front of a parentheses, that's equivalent to multiplying everything inside of that parentheses by that number. Hence the distributive. We take the A and we distribute it to the other terms. As an example, 3 times parentheses 2 plus 7 is the same thing as 3 times 2 plus 3 times 7. We multiplied everything inside the parentheses by the 3. If I start on the left, order of operations says the first thing I should do is that the addition, the grouping symbol, and 7 plus 2 is 9. 3 times 9 is then 27. Order of operations also tells us, on the other side, that the first step is to multiply. 3 times 2 is 6, and 3 times 7 is 21. We can then add 6 plus 21 and we get 27, which is good because these two things should be helpful, or they should be equal. And this is very helpful when we're simplifying algebraic expressions. Let's suppose we have something like 7x plus 2x. We know we wanted to use the distributive property, otherwise why would I have pointed it out? Well, you'll notice this looks a lot more like the right-hand side of this equation than the left-hand side. So essentially we're looking for the value of A. What is the thing that I'm multiplying by? And you'll notice in both the 7x and the 2x, there is an x. So this has to be equivalent to x times 7 plus 2, like the left-hand side. I know that 7 plus 2 is 9, and x times 9 is the same thing as 9x. Therefore, we can do what's called combining like terms. As long as things have the same variable, we can just add the numbers in front, skipping this actual property of using the distributive step and just knowing that it's going to equate to adding the numbers in front of that variable. Let's consider this example. My last one had 2 x's, however this time we have x's and y's. And the key is to start individually. Let's start with the x. I have a 3x and a 2x. And the distributive property then just lets me add those numbers in front. 3 plus 2 is 5. Now let's think about the y terms. I have a 7y and a minus 4y. So once again, we add those numbers in front. 7 minus 4 is 3. So we have 3y. Therefore, my final answer is 5x plus 3y. So how about we try something a little more complicated? This one is definitely more complicated than the ones we had before. However, the key is to stick with kind of our order of operations. Step 1 is always going to be grouping symbols, and that's not going to matter what you're dealing with. You usually need to deal with grouping symbols first. I can't actually add 4x plus 1 because those aren't like terms. One has an x and one doesn't. But we can use our distributive property again. We see the 7 in front, and if I multiply 7 times 4x, 7 times 4 is 28, so I get 28x. I also need to do 7 times 1 to get 7. And now we can look at combining like terms. For the x's, I have a 3x and a 28x, and 3 plus 28 is 31. On the other hand, I have a negative 2 plus 7, and we know that negative 2 plus 7 is 5. So this simplifies to 31x plus 5. What about this one? The key to having a negative sign in front of a parentheses is that we have to distribute that. It's like multiplying through by negative 1. Negative 1 times 3 is negative 3. negative 1 times 7y is negative 7y, and negative 1 times negative 8x is positive 8x. And then we can look at our like terms. If I start with the x's, I notice I have a negative 4x and an 8x, and negative 4 plus 8 is 4. Next, we look at the y's, and I have a 2y and a negative 7y. So 2 minus 7 is negative 5. And then finally, I have this negative 3 term that doesn't have any variables. And now this is as simplified as we can get it. It's important to know that the 4x and the negative 5y won't combine, since those are actually two different variables that represent two different things. In addition, you might have noticed that I started with x even though y was the first thing in my previous step. And the truth is, it doesn't matter which one you start with. Tradition tends to just dictate that we do things alphabetically, which is why I did x before y, but you could have very equivalently done this as negative 5y plus 4x minus 3.